Hey, Trekkers, welcome back to another episode of Trek Tonight. I'm going to lead right off because, let's see here. We already have, woohoo, here we go, from our good friend Keith Jacobson, the resident camera geek. And tonight, we have a special treat because Cliff Diamond, unfortunately, had an issue with his cat. His cat needed to have surgery. Cliff was up with him all night last night, and so Cliff could not be here today. And kindly, our dear friend Eric Hutz agreed to join us tonight. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Chris. How are you and Leo doing?
We're doing great. We're doing
walking and talking.
Walking and talking. We have
beats the alternative, so
that's very true. That's very true.
By the way, Cliff's cat refused to wear the cone of shame for a little up reference at the beginning of the show.
Yeah,
I suggested that Cliff wear one himself to show the cat it wasn't that bad, but
solidarity.
Yes, exactly. He didn't want to do that though, huh?
Yeah.
He said he couldn't find one in his size, but that sounds like an excuse.
Well, what he does in his personal life, I don't want to talk about.
Yeah, well, listen,
Yeah.
But like we miss having Cliff here, but we're very glad to have Eric with us.
Yes, we are. Scott Taylor gives us a thumbs up. Scott's here tonight.
Thank you, Scott.
Scott, good to see you. What is that? Oh, about the cat. A frowny face about the cat. Yeah, well, we have a lot of cat people here. Leo is a cat person. Eric's a cat person. And of course, we know because of Saber's regular appearance on the program that Keith is also a cat person. I had a cat very briefly who ended up going to live with my ex-girlfriend eventually. But in college, I had a cat.
Right, I remember.
Little.
But I'm not. I currently don't have a cat, but I do love cats.
Right.
And
you guys were big on Siamese cats, weren't you?
We had when I was growing up. We had a Siamese cat named Susie, and later on we had a cat called Misty, who was
I remember Misty,
long-haired but with Siamese markings, and we thought we came to the conclusion she was a rag doll because which is a breed that sort of goes limp. And I used to be able to hold her like on her back and like scratch her like right, sort of like under her head. And my mom was like, "You just hypnotize her," but she
hypnotize.
Yes. So, but she used to like to sleep on her back sometimes on the floor.
Oh, that's fun. That's cute. Well, my cat was interesting because I was always a dog person. So having a cat was a new experience for me in college. And I don't know whether it was me because I was used to raising dogs or what, but my cat would play fetch with me.
Oh, sometimes they will.
Yeah. I mean, I would I used to have a little super ball that was just her size. And I'd pitch it would bounce all over the place and she'd go crazy, but then she'd always bring it back.
Yeah. So but I think unlike a dog, she'll give it to you so you can throw it again.
Yeah. As opposed to the dog I had, about 10 years ago that would bring the ball, but would drop it just far enough away from you that you had to get up to get it.
Yeah.
That sounds real passive aggressive.
Yeah. He'd whine and he'd sit there. And basically what he was saying to me is, get your fat ass up off the couch and get this ball. But,
it's a little passive aggressive.
My in-laws dog will do the fetch. He'll grab the toy.
Right.
Then he'll run into their bedroom and drop the toy off on their bed.
Oh,
don't ask me why.
That's funny. That's interesting.
It's like, okay, this is really strange.
Why? Yeah. Craig Lubin says, "Hello, gents. Long live the dipshit from Chicago."
Yes.
I agree. What a great episode for his character. And Keith says, "Come for the Star Trek, get cat talk." Yeah.
Well, yes. Well, I think this ends our cat talk segment.
It does. Yes. We need to move on now.
Live television at its best.
Yeah. So, at any rate, Eric, I know you're up in PA, but you're a real Delaware guy, and that's why I didn't change the opening titles so that they said they just said New York and Wilmington. But where actually are you in PA still? You're in PA still, right?
Yeah. I'm in.
Yeah.
I moved from Chad's Ford, but over to Avondale. Although I'm closer to Kennett than I am to Avondale, so
Gotcha. Yeah,
just across the border. So pretty much the same area. I may as well be in Wilmington.
yeah, I know. Well, I mean, that's the thing. We're so close to the border on Pennsylvania and Delaware,
and Maryland,
right,
and New Jersey. It's like everything is nearby. But yeah, I'm not far out.
Right. Well, next to Rhode Island, we are a small but mighty. So
yes.
Any rate, let's get to the episode. I thought this was a great fourth episode. Lots of very exciting things, and I have some interesting clips tonight on the show for us to look at and discuss. But just overall, to start with, since you're our new guest host, Eric, what were your initial, just general takes on the episode?
Yeah, I like the episode. If there was a theme or themes, what jumped out at me would be, I'll call it parenthood and birth, in the sense that you had on multiple levels father son, relationships, discussions.
Oh yeah.
The emotions associated with being a parent, not necessarily, it could be applicable to motherhood as well.
Right.
But just how that completely changes your life. Riker, for example, at the time when you have Picard sort of wrestling with that, learning about Jack's existence, but even to the point where towards the end, where the nebula explodes and you see all of the space squids.
Right.
I'll call them space squids because I'm not sure what else to call them, but
right.
There was, so you had these themes of parenthood and birth and maybe a little bit of redemption as well.
Yeah. The space squids were kind of Baby Yoda space squids.
Yeah.
Well, they were cute. Yeah. They were like jellyfish, but they had like tentacles like a squid.
Yeah.
Maybe they're space cuttlefish. I don't know.
Yeah.
So my big takeaway was, and even the very, very first, 30 seconds where Picard is sitting at the bar or the restaurant trying to have some time for himself.
Right.
And all of the cadets come, and you can sort of see him rolling his eyes and being somewhat grumpy about being interrupted.
Right.
But then once he gets warmed up and starts telling his stories, you see a very different Picard.
Well,
and it's kind of like, all right. And as the show progresses, it's like, was this for real? Was it part of the holodeck? You never quite knew where, at least for me, when that took place in relation to the episode. But, parenthood was kind of my main takeaway.
Yeah.
Well, they did say 5 years ago.
Right.
It was a little
that's true. Good point.
It's funny because he said, well, I don't really like telling. I'm not much of a storyteller.
Yeah.
And which is a complete,
yeah.
That's space Dookie right there.
Yeah. Right.
He loves to talk.
Oh yeah.
And tell stories. So
although eventually he did want to have his trout before it got cold or whatever.
Yes. But he got to sort of hold court a little, and I think at first he was like, I just want to eat my lunch. Yeah. But I think he kind of enjoyed their adoration, and it's kind of hard not to.
Sure.
If you're well known, you have to be prepared. That people might recognize you. Especially, I think that was at Tent Forward at Earth, the LA one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So, but this was a very interesting episode because it was also about forgiveness, about sort of reconciliation and moving past your all your burdens, all the like self-imposed burdens you put upon yourself.
Yeah.
Riker goes through that Picard, Shaw.
Well, let me ask you guys a question, because this is something, and I feel bad in a way that I don't know the answer to this myself, because I feel like I've missed something that I should know. But when did Riker's son die? Did he die as an adult, or did he die
as a
in
child?
Birth? So he died at birth.
Not in birth. I think he was very young. I don't know. I don't remember, because it was addressed in the first season, and he was quite young. He was still a child.
Okay.
And it clearly, devastated Riker. And it's an interesting story, but it feels the Riker we see in this season is very different than the Riker we see in Picard season 1, who seems to have sort of made peace with his life, even though there's that, that tragedy, but they all seem to be moving past it, him and Deanna and his daughter.
Right.
So I don't know whether
that does turn out to be whatever he's done to cope with that does turn out to be what the issue is between he and Diana.
Yeah.
Deanna.
Yeah, and I think it gives him, kind of picking up off from where Leo was saying, I think that his being at peace with certain things, if you look at all of the episodes this season, when Riker is talking to Picard about the whole fatherhood thing,
Yeah.
it puts him, he's like the advisor. He sort of, look, you've got 17 seconds. That was the worst time for me.
Yeah.
And, they played up on that a couple episodes ago with Picard going down to see Jack.
Right.
I think it gives Riker the ability to objectively just say to Picard, look, you've got a great opportunity here. Don't screw it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they had this reconciliation in the beginning after, he orders him off the bridge and says, "You've killed us all."
Right.
Last week. But he's like, they both sort of apologize, and Picard starts to be like, well, he's like, shut up.
Yeah.
And listen to what I have to say. He says,
yeah.
He talks about the thing that had sort of driven the wedge between him and Deanna. And he says, we have like maybe 4 hours to live. So I suggest you take that time and try to get to know your son a little better.
Right. Right.
Which is what he does. He does go down to speak with Jack, and they go on the holodeck, which apparently has a separate power source, so people can. I mean, listen. I'm gonna have to give this a hand wave, because it feels like the amount of power it would take to maintain a holodeck feels like that could be put towards like shields or life support or thrusters, something.
Yeah, I mean, I get
everybody needs a bar, so
yeah. No, I mean, I get why they did that. They wanted to have this scene. They wanted to have it in that location, and they came up with this very loose explanation saying that, well, Starfleet engineers feel that people might need a place to go, if they were in some sort of a near-death situation. And I get that, I mean,
that makes sense from a Federation standpoint, because they're very, about the feelings and so on. Yeah. But it also, I know why they did, because they already built this new 10 forward. They've built that set. They want to get as much use out of it as they can.
Yeah.
I'm kind of disappointed it wasn't the 10 forward from the Enterprise D.
Yeah, interesting.
But
you know what? Probably why that 10 forward, and of course now I'm going to have people upset with me because I've said the opposite when it comes to TOS sets, but it is very dated in its 90s design.
It is.
And it would look, I think it would look jarring in comparison to everything else.
You're probably right. And it also means they would have to recreate that whole set, which, for one scene, which is not worth it.
Right. I mean, they could have done that back in the day when you first saw Guinan in there, and her bar could have looked a little bit more like the Enterprise 10 forward, and then they
Yeah,
have it set. But yeah,
Your new bar, not so many pastels.
right, exactly.
So
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a minor quibble. I'm fine with it being, because that looks more properly like a bar.
Oh yeah.
The 10 forward always looked like a place where you weren't actually, they weren't actually slinging actual drinks.
Right.
10 forward was pretty sterile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you looked at that bar, the one thing that jumped out at me was, it may not have been the same, but it was pretty similar to the bar where Picard and Riker meet at the beginning of this season.
Yeah.
Sure.
The Argonis lager sign in the back, it's like, okay, did they meet in a holodeck, or was this, why is this the same? But it's got a warmer bar feel to it.
Yeah, it does look like the place you go
there for a whiskey or a beer than 10 forward.
Also,
10 forward looked like the mess hall.
Yeah. Well, 10 forward also was kind of Eric and I know this because our kids went to school together. It was kind of a multi-purpose room.
Yeah.
They'd use it for ceremonies, they'd use it for
concerts,
grandparents' day, whatever it was, they'd use that room. So it looked to me like a room where you could clear the furniture and have an event occur there.
It's true. But I mean, again, that's a very TV conceit, because you've got these sets. Every time you have to build a new set, it's an extra expense,
right?
And that means you maybe don't have as many special effects, visual effects, and so on. So I mean,
they repurpose. They've been repurposing a lot of sets. I mean, we all have probably read that the Shrake's Bridge is actually the lower portion of Rios's ship.
Yeah.
Repurposed. And there's a lot of that, which I think is kind of cool that they're reusing that stuff and finding ways not to waste it. I'm amazed that the stuff's all still sitting there, because the old school idea with production is once you finish the show, you strike everything.
Well, I think they shot season 2 and 3 back to back.
Well, I see.
Okay.
Yeah. So. Yeah. But that was kind of cool. I mean, there's a lot to talk about in this episode this week. I'm going to break us away for a commercial break, but then we will be right back. As long as I can get it to run. Here we go.
Star Trek, the game. A game so challenging, you need this combat control panel to play it. Launch photons, fire your phasers, engage warp speed, blast Klingons and alien saucers on your way to the ultimate enemy, Nomad. Is it the most challenging game in the galaxy?
It's inhuman.
Star Trek from Sega.
Time travel or eBay account required for purchase.
Get a free Star Trek poster when you play Sega's Star Trek at any Musicland store.
Boy, I hope that is available on PS4.
Yeah, exactly. Do you guys ever remember playing? I don't remember that.
I don't remember playing that. I've maybe the vaguest memory of it existing.
Yeah.
But when that came out, Chris and I were in college at the time, and nobody was really playing video games. Like I didn't know of anybody who had a console in their dorm room.
Right. We were talking about that off air, because it was like, I don't think anybody when I went to BU had a console then.
I mean, we went down to the student union, we would pump quarters into Major Havoc or,
right.
The Tempest or, Centipede.
Asteroids.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember, we're going down a little rabbit hole here, but I remember when Dragon's Lair came out and they had it at the pizza shop in Kenmore Square in Boston.
Yeah.
Is that what the flying ostriches, where if you joust
that was
them?
Quest.
Joust. Yeah.
Joust.
Hey, Marty McFly says, haven't watched episode 4 yet, gents, so I'll have to come back. And that is true. we are. Let's see here.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Hang up.
Where is it? I have my spoiler alert. Where is my spoiler alert?
Is that the nerd alert or the spoiler alert?
No, that's yeah. Spoiler alert. Yeah. Anyway, that nerd alert really got you the other night, didn't it? Yeah, that was funny. I know you cracked up on that. John Van Gostein says the first F-bomb on Star Trek by Picard.
Yeah.
I have mixed reviews on it.
Well, he didn't stop at the F-bomb. There were a few other non-F-bombs, but afterwards there were a few other naughty bits that would not have passed on the Next Generation.
I'm not really. It's like because they first did on Discovery. And here's the thing: is like especially TOS, they all seemed very reserved. Like everybody, there was I don't know if I've told this. I told this story to Chris many times, and I don't know if I've ever told it on the show.
Yeah.
My father was from Austria, and I'm watching Next Generation. He comes into the room and he looks at the TV for a moment. He goes, "What is this? A Swiss ship?" And then walks out. To this day, I have no idea what he meant. But sadly, my dad is no longer with me, so I can't ask him.
I always took that as because how humorless they were.
Might be. I mean, I don't like. We love if we have any Swiss viewers. No offense meant.
Yeah, no shade meant. Yeah.
So I don't know what the Swiss's reputation is in Europe in terms of it, but there's a very stately sort of way that people acted. There wasn't a lot of, nobody swore because it was, even though it was syndication, it was still like broadcast TV.
Right.
And you can get away with it. It's not quite as profanity laced as I imagined Quentin Tarantino's version of Star Trek would have been. That would have had a lot of.
I'm trying to visualize, a cross between Kill Bill and Star Trek.
Me too.
Yeah, it could be fun, but
yeah. Well, Keith chimes in to say the F-bomb felt out of place to him. On the other hand, Dipshit from Chicago was great.
That was perfect.
Mind it because it's sort of in that moment, while Picard is normally like a very dignified fellow, he's talking with his son, and he's also like, the world's coming to the end. Like, what am I saving this for? What am I, why am I being so proper? Because there's a good chance we're all going to die.
Right.
If he drops an F-bomb, it makes him a little more human in a way that not that he seems inhuman otherwise, but it felt like here's a guy who's like, well, there's no point. He's just talking to his son, and he's like, I'm not going to impress him. I'm just trying to get to know him. So I can't imagine that he, doesn't swear sometimes around the vineyard.
I'm sure he does. Yeah. Now Keith, following back on that, also said he liked how quickly they made up. That seemed to me like what old friends do. They might have a fight, but it gets over quickly. And it's something that I know last week, Keith felt that the loggerheads that we got to, seemed out of place to him, or didn't seem natural, or seemed not earned, as he put it. But I think this sort of makes up for that, don't you think, Keith? I mean, you're right. It was resolved in a way that friends would resolve things. And I thought it was handled pretty nice. And
also as Riker is like, he said that in the heat of the moment, but he's also like, he suddenly has to be captain and he's responsible for everybody on that ship. So he's like falling back on all this training. And, once he realized like, well, we're probably going to die. So we're like, there's no point going, dying angry with one of your closest friends.
Right. Yeah. Keith does say he agrees. It didn't make up for last week.
And one thing I would say is, Riker may have reacted strongly, but he wasn't wrong.
No.
I mean, when you think about it, it's like, well, you kind of screwed us all over here with that team. And so, he's calling out a friend.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, and again, it gets back to reconciliation, redemption, whatever the arc is that,
right.
All right, we've been friends for a very, very long time. And look, you take the history there, in between the episodes of The Next Generation, you think the two of them didn't butt heads at various points?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. I mean, they butt heads on Next Generation.
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, they're still probably, they know each other better than anybody else. And they were like, okay, yeah, all right, you fucked up, Jean-Luc. But I still love you, and let's get ourselves out of this, because we've pulled our chestnuts out of the fire so many times in the past. We're better as a friendship working together than complaining and yelling at each other.
Right. And I'm pretty sure that back in high school in the model rocketry club, Leo may have said to me that I nearly killed a doll many times. So yeah.
He didn't tell you that last week or yesterday?
I have to say, and this just sort of occurred to me as we're watching it.
Yeah.
There's always a problem with the doctor on the show, because unless somebody gets hurt, the doctor doesn't have a lot to do other than, maybe give advice.
Right.
And this was a really wonderful way of using her medical expertise in a way, and I hate the term outside the box, because it's like one of the sort of a phrase dumb people say to sound smart.
Yeah, overused.
But it was like, let's say, an unorthodox application of her medical skills that was the secret to them surviving their predicament. So my hats off to the writers for coming up with that.
Yeah, it was a clever idea. What'd you think, Eric?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, who else would have figured that out but the doctor?
Right.
The connection of that and contractions, again, leading to the theme birth. There's nobody else that would have put two and two together. So I thought it was pretty cleverly done.
Yeah. And then towards the end of what we were just watching, you sort of see this glimmer of camaraderie in a way between Picard and Jack, because they both sort of have the same idea.
Yeah.
The idea that, well, there's energy there, and I thought that was kind of cool. There's a subtle glance from Jack over to Jean-Luc, that is sort of like, yeah.
Yeah, I quite like that. We've sort of skipped over a bunch of stuff that happened before this.
Yeah. Well, was there something that you felt was really important to talk about?
Well, there was the revelation of Shaw's, something we all theorized, that he was at the Battle of Wolf 359.
Well, that's true. Yes.
And he comes in and he's like, yeah, first time your old man ever tell you the first time we ever met, and he's a little hopped up on pain meds, and he comes into the 10 forward, bar. Yeah. And, he tells this whole story about how he was a grease monkey. He was like he was an engineering officer, and they got hit and they went to what they called the life deck. And then, there's only one escape pod with 10 seats, and there's 15 of them. Right. And then they're all waiting for orders. And then lieutenant comes in and be like, you, and you. And they picks him. And he's like, clearly has survivor's guilt, but also a great deal of anger for Picard. And, this was a wonderful scene for Shaw and Todd Stashwick, who is sort of becoming the breakaway, star of this series.
Yeah. I'm very much looking forward to. He's booked next on the Ready Room.
Yeah, he was. I watched that today.
Yeah, I'm very much. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm very much looking forward.
It's a great interview.
His interview, yeah.
And he's just and he's a mess. And it's like, here's the thing: if you went through that, that explains his thing with 7 of 9, making her say, Commander Hansen.
Right.
And he makes a comment about ex-Borg in reference to Picard in the first episode.
Right.
So we all thought he was at that battle, but that was almost a little, it was a little bit like that scene from Jaws when he's talking about being in the water with his buddies in the show, um, and that, you know, like I said, all the guilt that he had over this,
Right.
you know, and his anger, and you know, it's very similar to Cisco's feelings about Picard, as we saw
Yes.
the very first episode of
Well, and
DS9.
I've often wondered, you know, in how Picard's involvement as Locutus and at that battle got hand waved by so many people. So it's good to see that there are some people that don't feel that way.
There's
collateral
got to be a
damage.
lot.
Yeah, which is cool. Also, he mentions how many people died. Was it 15,000 people died?
I thought it was
11,000.
11,000.
I thought it was 11. Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, a not insignificant number. And
Right.
you know, I thought with that thread, you know, tying into the moment with Jack and Picard sort of looking at each other like collaborating, you had collaboration between Shaw and Seven.
Yeah.
Yes, which was also very cool, and I
It was
wanted to jump to that because
and the
because he's
thing
got-
is, you know, she figured out who the liquid imposter was
Yeah.
because LaForge's daughter, I guess, you know, called her Hanson rather than Seven,
Right.
and that was
The whole thing is that they have the knowledge, but not like deep knowledge, and they might pause. But also, like when she's going through this ensign's quarters, which are very spacious compared to, let's say, the quarters that the crew of the Cerritos enjoy, or the ensigns. But
or where Picard and Riker would first got there on their little bunk beds.
Yeah, they're but they also, you've noticed that, and I forgot the name, it's like a Vulcan exercise that we saw Tuvok using in Voyager.
I saw that too.
That was on his desk, and you know, she finds his pot. She's like, I imagine you don't mean cannabis. That was the first mention of cannabis and pot on Star Trek.
Yes. I thought that was great. Yeah,
that was pretty funny. I have to say, I got a good laugh out of that one.
I did too. Yeah.
And
but what's nice in that moment, Leo, that you bring up is that when she says she calls me Commander 7, out of respect, and then Shaw goes, and so he acknowledges that he's got a little evolution in his character.
I would say he's, you know, this was sort of a bit of a breakthrough, because it's like, because of his prejudice, you know, which you know, he sort of was like burying deep, but you know, it would spill out in sort of passive aggressive ways.
Right.
But he had to admit, it's like, you're a natural leader, you're an excellent officer, you'd make a great captain someday, you know. And she says, well, that's just what you'd say if you were changeling. He's like, yeah.
I thought that was great.
That was good.
Yeah, that was great. It's also interesting too, because he
but I think you know, the irony to that was that was his way of saying, I'm not, you know, an imposter.
Yeah.
But the way the show was, where things were going, maybe, you know, he wasn't entirely making it up at that point in time.
Right. Well, and it's
element of truth.
Yeah, because he also, I'm trying to think, is it at the end of the bar scene, or was it that moment with Seven where he says something about being an asshole replaced charm?
That was at the end of the bar scene.
Yeah.
And you know, because he knows, like, he's like, oh, I just went, like, he just vomited out all his resentment for all these years, which may have been cathartic, but the rest of the crew was looking like, what is up with the captain?
Yeah, right.
And he realized he did it in a very public way.
Well, and in that moment in the bar, we're sort of jumping all over the place.
Yes.
But in that moment in the bar, I loved it when he's going off on his rant, and then Jack stands up for his father.
Yeah.
And says, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
And then Jean-Luc says, no, I get it.
You're right. And he does. And he's very, it was sad because he very much seemed diminished in that moment, I would say. In a way that we don't yet. Patrick Stewart's not an especially tall actor. He's shorter than Jonathan Frakes. But he always seemed to command a room. In that moment, he seemed very much like, Yeah, you're not wrong. I did do that, all that stuff. It's again, I would never deprive myself and the rest of Star Trek fandom of Picard's presence on Star Trek after the events of Best of Both Worlds.
Right.
But in the real life, they might have promoted him to a desk job.
Right.
Or promoted him and said, well, you were connected. Listen, you've been through a lot. You spend your family has a vineyard. Maybe you should, take some time. But like again, I'm not sorry he was in the rest of Star Trek, but there's got to be a lot of people in Starfleet who are like, this guy was responsible for all these people's deaths. So
right. Now Keith says, let's not forget Shaw. Todd has stolen the show every time he's been on the screen.
It's true. He's and it is tough to come in. I think I'm glad that they've turned the trope of the outside captain being like a dick. I mean, he acts like a dick, but it's not for no reason. It's not just like he's the guy who comes up and is, like, well, we're going to do things a little different now. He's not Captain Sykes from Search from Spock with his space swagger stick, and let's beat some of Enterprise's speed records. And,
Keith says the interview on Ready Room was great. So
it's a very good one.
Yeah, I have to go back and watch that. And he also said that his that monologue was one of his all-time great Star Trek monologues.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he's talking about the wolf.
Yeah.
And Craig says, never steal a changeling's resting bowl.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Because she does find it, and it's got residue, as Shaw says.
Yeah.
And then, the changeling sees her in the hallway and executes the officer he's walking with, and then phasers it out of her hand, which is some pretty sharp shooting.
Yeah.
And then, she shoots at him, and then he goes up and goes into the vents.
Yeah, right. Right.
And, he does show up again, or I would say he, but I think changelings are sort of asexual.
I think so, yeah.
But there's another thing we haven't talked about, which is the events going on the Shrike.
Well, hang on one second. I just want to throw this last comment out. Keith says, I hope they don't kill off Shaw. I want to see more of him after Picard.
Yeah, I don't think they will. I suspect we will see a series of Titan A novels with Shaw as the captain. I'd be very surprised if if that's not already being written as we speak.
Right.
I would agree. I mean, my first reaction, as you guys talked about in the first episode, was, what a douche. To be blunt. But there's obviously more to him, than what they had it planned in the first episode, if you will. And there's a lot more depth and a lot more, there's more to it. And so I think, I would be very disappointed at this point if they killed him off. Even if they didn't do any kind of a spin-off, it's just, he works, he fits in with what's going on. And I think he'll become eventually almost as reckless as Riker and Picard through circumstances. But I would hate to see him be killed off.
I don't think they'll kill him off. I think if, like when he got injured, I'm glad that he's still around. Like that he wasn't in a coma, which would be like for a weekly hour-long drama, that might be like the case. Right. But I don't think they're going to waste him. I think they know what they've got with him as the captain, and I also know him, so he used to live in New York, and we both did improv, and we were like knew each other, and in the same circles. And he's also a huge nerd. He's a huge sci-fi fan. So this is like, this has got to be a dream come true.
Oh gosh, yes.
So, and he talks about that in his interview on the Ready Room, which I suggest once we're finished with our show, you go watch that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But not before, because we got stuff to talk about.
I can't believe it, but Will Wheaton is 50.
Yeah,
He looks great for 50, I think.
he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, not too long, about the last week's episode with Worf, and I was
Right.
like, yeah, Worf has aged pretty well. I would be happy if I have aged as well as he did. I know I haven't, but boy, that's something to aspire to.
No, and actually, in last week's episode of the Ready Room, I think there's an interview. Is there an interview in that with, or is it the week before, with the woman who plays Rafi, talking about just
They're both going to be on next week's episode, but I think they talk to them because they do like these little mini interviews.
right?
They're usually sitting in the corridor and they talk about like, they're more like little sound bites, but they're
Well,
very.
and Frakes was talking about what great shape he's in and just how great he looks.
I mean, Michael Dorn is keeps himself in fighting trim,
oh yeah,
and this was also an episode we'll mention. There was that story didn't get any attention. It was all on the Titan, but I think considering all the stuff that was going on the Titan, I don't think there was room. But next week, I think we're going to go back to the Rafi Worf team up, which I'm digging big time.
right. Now you said something quickly before we leave this and go back to our clip.
The strike,
yeah.
So Captain Vadic is communicating with what I'm going to guess is a changeling. And either she is a changeling because she cuts off her hand and it goes old changeling gooey, that weird fleshy color.
Yeah,
it's very unappealing. I mean, it's great, but it's not pleasant to look at.
No,
and it becomes this weird face that's hovering above her. And he's like, "Well, we lost, Jack Crusher," and he's like, "Well, you've got to get." I mean, and she's like, "Well, it's suicide. It will be suicide if you don't." So everything's expendable. Your ship, your crew, yourself.
Right.
Go do it. And they have to dump the portal weapon. And you see it fly off. You see Daystrom Institute, embossed on the side, and they go in. Which comes into play towards the end of the episode, as we'll discover.
Right. Yeah.
So the real question is, if the changeling is sabotaging things on the Titan, why isn't it's put the crew of the Titan in a very bad position. It seems to undermine the mission of getting Jack Crusher.
Yeah.
Although it's they probably just did it so they wouldn't be able to run away. They didn't intend for them to start tumbling towards the gravity well.
That's true. Yeah. I don't think that they had that in mind. I don't think they understood that would happen. But yeah.
And one thing that I kind of wondered too, is at least the impression I had, was that when she was being, berated, if you will, by the higher goo power, you got the sense, at least I did, that she wasn't all that happy about the situation she was in.
No.
Right.
It was kind of like, maybe she would have been perfectly fine the way things were with, the ship tumbling and her being done. And he's like, no, you've got to go and finish what we told you to do. And I got the distinct impression she wasn't all that thrilled about that. So you got to wonder, at least I do, about her motives and, where, her loyalties are, if you can say loyalties, or where the money is, or there something there. And again, Chris, you had mentioned the, tricky little rabbit holes that they kind of previewed during last season that went nowhere.
Right.
I wonder whether this is one of those, or whether there's some tie-in to the overall arc.
I'm hoping it'll tie into the overall arc, because this seemed to be a much more focused storyline than last season. And also, she seemed genuinely terrified. She was really, because she's normally spin around in a captain's chair and smoking and cackling and ordering,
and very
weapons
cocky.
fired.
Yeah, very cocky. Yeah.
Very cocky, very high status. And then, the goo head shows up and she's like, I'm sorry, we lost him. It was unavoidable.
Yeah.
And she looks genuinely terrified in a way that we haven't seen before.
Right.
So that is some grade A Star Trek sci-fi nonsense.
Oh, yeah.
I love that stuff because it's utterly absurd, but that's exactly what they do. It's like they were like, what if we could do this, and if we channel we manually open the baffles and absorb the energy, it goes straight to the warp core, recharging, and then we ride it like a wave, and it's
and we've done this before, and it's worked in the past. So hey, screw it, let's try it again.
Yeah, he says it's giving me TNG chills.
Yeah,
but it is cool to see them sort of come together. And while it's not as formal as some of the ready room or conference room discussions on Next Generation, it does have that feel to it a little bit. They're all there talking and trying to talk this out, and then they come up with this sort of exciting plan. And Riker decides, now he's being too cautious. So,
it's true. He became much more cautious once he had to take command.
Right.
And it occurred to me when I saw that, especially the second time around, it's almost like Jack was taking the role of Riker in the, hey, let's roll the dice, let's go for it.
Yeah.
Riker was like doing the Picard, like, well, I don't know, let's think about this.
Yeah.
And Picard is just kind of like, just go with it, Will. Just go with it. But there were moments there where I was like, Jack seems to be channeling what Picard was doing in the Next Generation, where Riker was sort of like the wild man.
Right.
And dragging Picard kicking and screaming into certain things that just happened to work. And it was just kind of, it seemed to me kind of an interesting, not role reversal, but shift.
Right.
Where Riker is the voice of reason. Jack is the crazy man, and Picard just kind of sitting back, thinking, my work here is now done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did like the evocation of Deanna's name by Beverly, it's like, and also pointing out, like, we've done this sort of thing so many times. We're great at this.
Right.
So it's, because also he's like, about certain death. I'm like, they're going to have certain death if they do nothing.
Right.
So why not roll the dice and see what happens?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's a level of trust in that crew from TNG. They've had each other's back all those years, so many similar situations. You're in the best position you can possibly be, in the sense that it's a no-win situation, but who would you rather have with you?
Yeah.
Right. Try to get yourself out of it.
Right. Exactly. Now, because we are coming close to the end of the hour, and I'm sure we'll run over a tiny bit, I want to talk a little bit about before Eric became a host with us, he was also a viewer, and let me see here. Oh, wait, I've got the wrong thing. He wrote into us last week after last week's show, and now here it is, and asked a question. And his question was a question that occurred to me after the show last night. What do you make of Jack's hallucinations while succumbing to the gas? You could see Seven and the red tendrils behind her on the wall. The tendrils reminded me of the proto-molecule from The Expanse, different show, and the IIRC. What's the IIRC, Eric?
That must have been a typo. I was thinking, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
Maybe the rest of it, but it was the spore drive from Discovery
Yeah,
You know,
sure. You go on. Yeah,
fungus kind of aspect to the tendrils, the
Right.
threads.
exactly.
I wasn't sure if that was. I mean, I had a feeling it had some significance, but it was very brief, and he was also like being gassed in that chamber. He says,
But they repeated it again in this episode.
Yeah, they repeated.
Right. And Keith says, also ask the same question, which is what's up with the red visions Jack is getting. So clearly that's going to be something we're going to start addressing.
Yeah.
You know.
Does it sound like Beverly saying him, talking to him? Or is that my imagination?
It did that or Troy. I mean, the voice sounded familiar, you know, so whether
right.
significance to it, I don't know, but
I clearly this ties into this whole storyline.
Yeah.
Why? Because other than this, there's been no reason why everybody's got such a hard on to get Jack Crusher. You know, how his bounty can't be that big that it would necessitate this very elaborate, this very elaborate ship, the chasing him down, and the changelings. It's clearly he's having these visions are the result of something he's been exposed to or something he's seen, or maybe he's just psychic and he's just one of those people who just has that rare gift.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's clearly what we're going to find out, but I am sure this is why people are after him.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Whatever it is.
Now, Keith jumps in to say, we didn't get to talk about that. And what he's referring to is that Jack did look up Picard and he went to the bar.
Right.
And overheard Picard saying that Starfleet was the only family he needed. Keith says, it broke my heart when Picard realized what he had done. And that's, it's not, as we learned from that flashback, that he decided not to go look up his father. Right. It said he did and overheard that and thought, well,
he asked him, he says, you talk about your crew being your family, but did you have an outside life? Have you ever wanted a real family? And Picard gives him, Starfleet's the only family I've ever needed.
Yeah, and he's very glib about it. Yeah,
all these cadets are like, bravo.
Yeah.
And, which has got to be soul crushing because you would hope he'd be like, well, I regret never having a family. My career that's like my great regret is that I never got to have a family, and his whole line about Starfleet being the only family I ever needed rings a little false. It feels like something he said for the cadets' benefit more than for his own.
Right.
Because when Renee, his nephew and his brother and his sister-in-law were all killed in a shuttle accident. By the way, I don't know why people still use shuttles because they seem to be very prone to accidents. If Star Trek is to be believed, but he's like, I'm the last of the Picards, and I'm never gonna have it. Like he feels like he's never gonna have that family. He's never. The line is he's the last of it, and he's not, as it turns out.
And had he known of Jack's existence, would he have answered the question the same way?
Right. Probably not. Maybe not.
Probably not.
Yes.
It's hard to say.
Time, he was, fat, dumb, and happy. He had no idea that he had a son.
Right.
And so it's very easy for him to say, oh, yeah, Starfleet is everything. But, had he known, had Beverly told him about Jack's existence, maybe the answer would have been very different.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to think that he would have, I don't know if he would have retired, but he might have taken a desk job and just, been there for Beverly and Jack.
Well, and as he said to Beverly, you took that choice away from me.
Yeah, we'll never know.
Keith says the transporters are not without their problems as well.
That's true.
Which is very true. He also threw in, find me. Is that the same voice that was talking to Vatic?
A lot of mystery. On this plate.
Yep. And he reminds us that DNA is in the credits, I think there is something about Jack at a DNA level that's important. I have no idea what.
Possibly.
But yes, DNA is in the final credits. How many transporter clones are running around the Federation anyway? Yeah.
Yeah, and from the DNA part, I did see, look at that again. It's not just the visual helix, but there's also protein sequences, the CAG,
right,
amino acid, so the alphabetical part of the protein is also in there. So you get the chemical structure and the physical helix. So I think, there's got to be something there that we don't know yet.
Yeah, clearly.
Maybe Jack is part liquid or goo. Who knows? I mean, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, for a while, I almost thought that going back to Beverly's trust nobody. That the whole Jack thing. All right, is this just a ruse to get Picard out in the open to go after him, or the rest of the band, if you will?
Right.
And Jack was just sort of a cat's paw, kind of false flag operation. But that last vision tied to what he saw when he was under the influence with the gas suggests to me that no, it's not a false flag. There is something about him that's different.
Well, and this was a theory that I had. Keith jumps in to say Picard was Locutus. Is Jack part Borg?
Well, that was the question I asked you, email, the timeline.
Right.
When was Jack conceived? Because if Jack was conceived post Locutus, maybe there's some, maybe there's a DNA or something where he's got some Borg in him.
Right. And it could be that there's some nanites hidden in there somewhere that got transferred. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, look, to me, it's an open slate. They can go in a lot of different directions with that, that storyline. And, I'm kind of curious to see where they go with it. Because
I am too. Guys, we are 7 minutes after the hour. Are there some last thoughts on the
I like the scene where Seven and Shaw were working on opening up the vents, and then Sydney LaForge shows up, and we just saw her on the bridge. So you're like, first of all, which one is the shapeshifter? Because I'm like, it could have been the one on the bridge,
right?
But she got it with like Commander what? Commander Hansen. She's like, zap, and that was I think a moment where she and Shaw sort of, they've been, at loggerheads, but I think they're on a journey to becoming, a better captain and first officer with each other.
Right.
Because she saved his life, because she was like, so if only one is open, we can't go into warp, right? That kind of, making sure that, if she kills him now, what's going to happen?
Right.
But I like that. I like that moment between them.
Yeah.
So,
how about you, Eric? Any last thoughts?
I like well-crafted banter, and the banter between Picard and Riker so far in this whole series has been classic, but taken maybe to some new levels. I like the banter between Worf and Raffi.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing banter to pick up where Leo just said, there was some banter and some good banter between Shaw and Seven.
Right.
And you have all the sci-fi trappings and all of that, but sometimes for me, it's just that interaction between some characters that, are kind of, poking each other, but with a common purpose. And so I'm happy to see Shaw and Seven kind of get into that mix.
I agree
very
with
well
you.
done.
Yeah, I agree with you, Eric. I think that a lot of the hallmarks of this particular season have been the writing. And I think the character interactions between all of them has been fantastic. Keith, pardon me, guys. Keith has one last question, and that is, why was the changeling on the Titan? It was on the Titan before there was any idea that Jack would be there or be on it. And that's an interesting question.
It is a question. And the question is, how many changelings are out there infiltrating Starfleet?
Right. Right. I don't know that changeling was there having anything to do with Jack per se.
No.
I think that there just may be changelings infiltrating all over the place.
Could be. I mean, the only reason they would have been assigned there is, I mean, it seems like a big leap that they would think that Riker would like go and come in. Like it you know, it's hard to say. I don't know the reason. I would say the reason for them to be assigned there is if they knew they were going after Jack, they could sabotage the ship. That way, it would be easier for them to take him.
Right. But I don't know how they would have known that.
No, that's a good.
I think that I think that Keith's point is that it feels like that changeling was there for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jack is a wild card. And
right.
You know, the changelings, unless, you know, there's some aspect to Jack that nullifies, neutralizes, or is able to spot the changelings. But it seems to me that, they're there, but he seems to be the disruptor.
Right.
Yeah.
And what kind of a disruptor? Who knows? But they've got a lot of ways to go.
Yeah, Craig Lubin says Captain Shaw is probably going to call his first officer Commander 70. The whole phaser in the chest thing is a great motivator for it. I mean, that may very well be true. Angela says, remember the guy at the bar eavesdropping on Riker and Picard?
Yeah.
Yes, tossing his
there's
fat one into the drink. Yeah. It's a very good point, Angela. We've sort of forgotten about him.
Yes. They tend to listen. Those changelings, they're everywhere. We can't be. We have to be vigilant.
Exactly. Keith says the ship, the guts of the Titan A, is the old Titan. Is there something about the original Titan that it wanted? I don't know. Good.
I don't think so. But you know, if it was hoping to get Riker's extensive jazz recordings, it's SOL.
Because they've been dumped, as we know. That is funny. Well, that's a great moment to end on. Eric, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you
for joining us this week. It was a delight to have you on the program.
It's been a pleasure. Really a lot of fun.
I'm thrilled. Leo, I will see you when I see you, because I see you all the time. And live long and prosper, folks. We will be back next week, both with our Wednesday night Mandalorian show and, of course, the Picard show right here on Thursdays at 8 p.m. So until then, have a fantastic week. And we will see you soon. That's right, Angela. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great day.